Friends, welcome to Leading Theologically. I'm your host, Zoë Garry. It is my pleasure to serve at the Presbyterian Foundation as the Associate Director for Theological Education Funds Development. In this role, I get to work with our Presbyterian seminaries, churches, and partner organizations that are invested in supporting theological education. For this season, we will be exploring discernment and the vital role discernment has in our faith and in our lives. Big things are happening, and from that, big questions form. For this reason, this season will focus on different aspects of discernment. And our guest today is Reverend Ann-Henley Nicholson. Ann-Henley is currently the Vice President for Enrollment Management and Vocational Outreach at Columbia Theological. Welcome, Ann-Henley.
Thank you so much, Zoe. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so I've known Ann-Henley since I was in seminary, and she has decades of experience working with young adults in discernment for ministry, both as someone who went through seminary herself and has worked for 2 of our Presbyterian seminaries. So I'm so excited to hear your wisdom and experience as we focus on discernment. So welcome to Leading Theologically. So we're beginning every season with this question of just kind of setting the stage of the role that discernment played in your life. You obviously have a big breadth of engaging with discernment, specifically at seminary. So at what point in your ministry did discernment become an important practice?
That's such a great question. Such a great question. Honestly, I think discernment became a part of my practice well before I was aware I was doing that. For a long time, I really wrestled with the question, what is my greatest use? What is my greatest and highest use? And for a while, I thought that might be acting in New York in the theater. That is where my background is. And through a process that I now know is called discernment, I discerned alongside a lot of family and friends and people invested in me and my sense of vocation at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. And that awakened me to ministry professionally, awakened me to all the ways in which I was already doing young adult ministry and already practicing discernment as I was seeking a way to use the fullest extent of the gifts that God had given me.
Wow. That's really cool. I had forgotten that you were acting in New York before seminary. Wow, what a formative experience that must have been to do a completely big shift of being kind of in front and deep and have got separate church life and then making that transition into ministry. So you talk to a lot of students that are in that transition, that are wondering, is this where I go to next? They're in that period of discernment. When students are in that point of discernment and they're coming to you as the face of enrollment or applications into seminary, what are the questions that you hear most from students? Like, what do they want to know from you of their own discernment for coming into seminary?
Such a great question. Honestly, it depends on the student. It depends on how familiar they are with theological education. They, in their own way, might be wrestling with what is their greatest and highest use. How might they meet this moment that we find ourselves in this country and in the world? How might they articulate what they believe in a way that helps them and doesn't harm others? How might they disrupt what they have come to know about God and about themselves, in an environment that encourages that kind of intellectual and theological curiosity. All of these things are part of the many conversations I have with prospective students. Some of them need to understand, need to demystify what a theological education is. And others are really familiar with it and have been wrestling with a sense of call to ministry in one way or another for decades. Mm-hmm. And somehow find themselves in this season, giving in to this sense of call, really listening to this still small voice that has become louder about where God might be leading them. And so they tend to have many more questions that are well-informed about seminary and are really curious about how Columbia can uniquely position them for their sense of vocation, what kind of impact they can make were God to lead them here to be formed and transformed in this particular environment.
Mm. So it really depends on kind of how the student is showing up in this space, what their big question is. It's not, you don't see like a lot of the same questions woven throughout the different students. It's really a huge spectrum.
Yes. Whether they're second or third career students or they are teenagers who have been exposed to vibrant youth ministry and are serving as a youth elder or a youth leader in their denomination and are recognizing gifts in themselves for ministry, thanks to those in their midst, encouraging them in that way, empowering them in that way, and reminding them every chance they get that every pastor they know came from the pews. So if they're invested in the church and they want to see the church in many different forms continue to exist, then God's going to continue to call people. And usually when you remind people of that, someone hears a call.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in campus ministry, I made a point to ask every single one of my students when they're a senior, are you feeling a call to ministry? Even if, I didn't know where they were landing, but I just wanted to ask the question just to make sure that, you never know where those tugs or where the Spirit is leading. And I was astounded at how many students would say yes. I would think maybe one in this big group of seniors, but the Spirit works in so many different ways. And it does when you actually give that question or give that reminding of the diversity of calls, of
Yes.
how many different people come to this place. It's really cool to see how many people upon that invitation can see themselves in that.
Absolutely. There's a common misconception about seminary that most people who are drawn to a theological education feel a sense of call to serve in congregational ministry. And while thankfully there are still plenty of people who are sensing that call and following that call, there's also a myriad of other ways of doing ministry, professionally or not, that a theological education can help equip you for.
Yeah. Like us.
Exactly.
Two ladies theologically trained, not working in churches. Yeah. But
doing ministry in lots of different ways. I often say that that usually, at least in my experience, that usually God's call always lies beyond the limits of my own imagination. And as long as I can continue to recognize that, then and listen to that, then I am continuing to recognize that discernment is a lifelong process and God is full of surprises.
Yeah. And really kind of focusing on like discernment is a lifelong process that has this big spectrum of people. And yet people, when I was in seminary, there was this fictional perfect seminary student. I don't know who this was, but everyone felt like they didn't live up to this student.
Mm.
Everyone felt inadequate to this student, but this student also just didn't exist. So what would you tell someone who feels that they don't live up to this supposed typical seminary student, this person who grew up in the church and had so many people see their call to ministry. They went to a Presbyterian college and majored in religion and Bible studies and took Greek already, and then came to seminary and was ready to be a pulpit pastor. Like those people exist, and they have such a great, amazing call, but even they will sometimes have these feelings that they're not adequate enough or they're not equipped enough. So what would you say to someone who feels like they don't live up to this supposed typical or perfect seminary student, and how would you welcome them?
Mm. I would likely begin by honoring their humanity and their recognition of that. I would remind them that God doesn't call people who have it all together. That there are so many examples of that in the Bible, of people suffering from imposter syndrome, although I haven't yet seen those terms in Greek or Hebrew, and yet there's so many humans who question God's call, question their own adequacy or self-sufficiency, and the whole and yet God continues to call them. And I think that having a healthy dose of humility and humanity is such an opportunity for letting the Spirit come in and do its work. And it's also a healthy recognition that this is Jesus's ministry that we've been called to be a part of. Lest we ever forget that the ministry that we are doing and called to is not ours. We are in service to something else far greater that uses so many, hopefully we are called to something that uses so much of who we are and who God has gifted us to be, and so many aspects of us that we don't have, so many skills that we need to lean on others and Jesus for. And all together, that reminds us, again, whose ministry this is.
I really love that. And I feel like that's often not the conversation that we hear. It's more about, how do I equip myself? How do I equip myself? How do I equip myself? But really, like you said, you are called into this greater community through Christ. And those people are also equipped. And so what does it look
Yes.
like to truly understand our call in connection to others? I love that a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that you love that so much. I genuinely, I have to regularly remind myself of that as well. One of the things I often had to remind myself in seminary was that we are, yes, a community of shepherds, but we are also sheep. And that alone continues to preach to me. And when I am remembering that, it's a good word. It's a good word. And if I am practicing my ministry from that place, it means I am acknowledging my humanity and my reliance on other human beings and all of creation, and most especially God within and among us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is this hyper independence that we find in our culture, right? That, even just this language of equipping, like I'm still kind of pulling at that where, I have been told all the things that I need to do, like the certifications that I need to have, the degrees that I need to have, the ways that I need to be able to be the be all of these ministries or in these communities as a leader. And what does it really look like when we shift that hyper individualization of equipment into the true community that we have, where we are all called into some form of leadership?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only is that leaning into our Reformed theology,
Mhm.
recognizing that ministry is something to which we have all been called in one form or another, whether
Mm.
or not we go to seminary, whether or not
Mhm.
we do
Yeah.
some form of professional ministry. We believe we are all called, that ministry is not restricted to those wearing robes. And if we're taking our baptismal vows seriously, then we recognize that we are nurturing people not only in their faith, but also in their ministry. And to see everything that we do as a form of ministry is is an awakening is an awakening that
Mhm.
I think the Presbyterian Church in particular offers the wider conversation, the wider theological discourse, because we really do hang our hat in this sense
Yeah.
that we can't do this alone, that God
Mhm.
is God and we are not, and we need each other. We need each other, and we need all of the different gifts within the kingdom to be a fuller
Absolutely.
human, a fuller church.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just down to the very name, like Presbyterian, like ruled by elders, not ruled by one pastor, but ruled by this community that we've entrusted the church and leadership to. So thinking about that, understanding that there is such a diversity of calls, and that some people are called into wearing robes, some people are called into being an elder or a deacon. Um, how do you create spaces of discernment for students to see if seminary is right for them?
Another great question. Another great question. We seek to create opportunities for people to connect with us on our campus and off our campus.
Mhm,
We seek to mobilize our alumni, who tend to be our best partners in
mhm,
this sort of vocational discernment work, because they not only understand what seminary is about, they understand Columbia Theological Seminary in particular, and can immediately transport themselves back to the classrooms here, back to the community here, and the transformation that happened within these walls and within the classrooms, within the refectory, within their own apartments, within faculty homes. All the faculty live nearby.
mhm,
So we seek to create those opportunities for people, whether it's one-on-one with a member of our faculty or our staff or our students, um, to discern, to speak about how God is at work in their life, and for us to be listening together to see if seminary might be a good and faithful next step for them. And then to also see if Columbia might be a good and faithful place for them to not conform, but to be formed and transformed, and to be able to, again, articulate what they believe, so that more and more people might recognize that all theology is practical, that all
mhm,
theology has practical implications for how you live, where you live, how you vote, who you pay to do your hair, who you associate with, who you are in relationship with, that all of these beliefs are informing how you live. And a theological education, one of the gifts of a theological education is that it empowers you with an awareness of how those beliefs really matter. And hopefully at the end of it, it helps you be able to leave with a theology that invites and includes rather than harms or kills. These are the kinds of opportunities that we are seeking to create on the front end and throughout the 1, 2, 3, 4 or more years you might spend with us.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 19. Yeah.
Some people need to go part-time. We are so committed to
absolutely.
This ethic of equity and access and human flourishing. That we recognize that some people are bivocational already. Some people don't have the ability to be a full-time student for a variety of reasons. And we want to honor that. We also want to invite those who can be a part of our full-time residential learning community to come and be a part of that and to teach us and learn with us, to co-labor with us in the classroom. That's the kind of where we love to have those people, and we love to have those people who need to take longer so that they can be a part of this community and teach us so many things along the way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, faithfulness is one of those, especially when you're going a non-traditional route.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have seen seminary from many different vantage points. First as a seminarian student, then as the director of alumni relations, and now the VP of enrollment. So how has seminary changed throughout your different experiences? And then what has remained constant?
Your questions are great, Zoe. Crushing it with your questions. How has seminary changed and how has it remained the same? Such a good question. One of the ways that seminary has changed is in the increased diversity of thought and theology and vocational possibilities and aspirations. Again, we are seeing not only those who feel called to ordained ministry and are in a denomination that requires a master's of divinity for them to be ordained and serve in a congregation. We're seeing more and more people who are interested in chaplaincy, in intercultural chaplaincy. One of the things that Columbia, one of our distinctives is that we offer an intercultural chaplaincy certificate to our degree-seeking students as part of their education and formation here. We're seeing more and more people drawn to pastoral care and counseling, whether or not that leads them to a form of chaplaincy. We're seeing those who are called to serve in nonprofit sectors, who are called to be tent makers and create new worshiping communities. We're seeing more and more people who are called to serve a church in a form that doesn't yet exist, and yet they are faithful. Again, that faithfulness comes in to their sense of God's leaning on their life and the Spirit's leading them to seminary to explore that, to discern how they might use these skills and awaken their theological imagination in a way that can benefit the larger church. We're seeing more and more imagination within our faculty and their openness to the ways in which they are called to form and transform these current students and this future ever evolving church in so many ways. And yet some of the constants are that God continues to call people. God continues to call people to ministry in so many different ways, which continues to sing to my heart, reminding me that God is not going to leave the church without a witness. I believe that with all of my heart. And there are so many narratives out there about how the church is changing, how it's evolving. And my encouragement to those who might be discouraged is to take a minute to, even whether or not you're discerning a call to seminary, come visit a seminary and you will see a variety of people with a variety of gifts who are called to serve our God and the Christ kingdom in so many different ways. And they really are called from north and south, east and west, all over the globe. We have a very global campus, and that benefits all of us and our perspectives about seminary and about our relevance within the larger discourse about moral leadership and about what really matters, and theological education really matters.
Yes.
And could not matter any more than right now, being able again to form people who really recognize their own theologies at work, and how they can be responsible for those theologies, and a theology that is not extremist, but a theology that is faithful and open to God's continual conversion on their life.
I love that invitation to visit a seminary. No matter where you are in your own call or your own discernment, or just being able to be on the campus, there's such a unique energy to it, of that creativity and that imagination that you spoke of. I loved it. It was so much fun for me to be able to grow in my faith and grow in my relationships, and have that place where everyone was dedicated to learning and changing and letting God transform their lives. And I think that energy is so important. Obviously, it is found in many different places, but there is something really unique and cool that happens on seminary campuses. So I love that invitation.
Amen.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up, and I can't thank you enough for your wisdom, and you've left me with many things to think about or see things differently. I'm still kind of ruminating on that. Like, yes, we're equipped, but God is equipping so many people around us also. I'm gonna take that one. Probably gonna preach on it in a couple of weeks. I
Let
love
me
it.
know, because I want to tune in. I want to tune in, friend.
Yes, I can't tell you what a specific gift that wisdom was. So the question that we're ending our season with for each interview is, what is a discernment tool you have found most helpful in your call in ministry? Really, we think these conversations are so deep and fruitful, but we're also wondering if there are specific tools or practices that you have that we can offer people.
Such a great question. I love, well, this is a plug, a shameless plug for Credo.
Yes.
I cannot sing the praises of Credo and its importance in our denomination as a key discernment tool, as a means of learning various practices of discernment in community. So if you don't know what Credo is, I encourage you to look at it, to explore it, and to seek that kind of formation and opportunity to be with colleagues in ministry who are also discerning their sense of God's call on their life, even as they continue to serve God in various ministry contexts. I also have found that Ignatians' practice of writing your consolations and desolations at the end of the day, so those places where you experienced God's joy and where you experienced a sense of draining. Something was either soul giving or soul draining.
Yeah.
Trusting that God is not calling us to a life of misery, but rather calling us to a life that is full of vibrancy and vitality and hope and joy. And while it will not only be exclusively full of all of those positive consolations, where there is more of that tends to be, God continues to speak to me in that, where I am feeling more of those things, that tends to be God's invitation to seek that first, seek those gifts first, and find a way to either make them more prevalent in my current ministry context, or sometimes, depending on where I am, that God uses that practice to have me explore where I might be able to lean into more of those consolations more regularly in another ministry context.
Yeah, I love both of those examples because I think they show us also the spectrum of discernment, right? Like part of our tradition is to do discernment in community.
Yes.
Which Credo is a huge resource to do. Also like within our churches and our CPMs and COMs, like we are called to do discernment in community.
Yes.
But we are also like, we have ourselves as well. And what does it look like to trust ourselves in this discernment process and be able to see the ways, whether that's daily or weekly, the ways that God is showing up in our lives. So, wow.
Amen.
Thank you.
Also, small plug for Richard Foster's A Celebration of Discipline. There are many different spiritual disciplines, and I am convinced that spiritual disciplines are the best way that we can sustain ourselves and lead in a healthy way, that our ministries can be healthy and faithful.
Yes, and we do. We have so many tools that can support us. So thank you for joining this conversation on discernment, sharing your wisdom and all of these amazing ways that we can think about discernment in a seminary context. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe. This was a gift. This is certainly a consolation of my day.
It's 9 a.m.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.